Greetings, wizards! Most of us play Skyrim the same way. We loot what's obvious, equip what looks impressive, and assume anything truly powerful will announce itself properly. However, Skyrim does not share that assumption. Some of the strongest weapons in the game are quiet, unremarkable, and sitting exactly where we weren't encouraged to look. And once we realize how they work, they don't just make fights easier, they fundamentally change how combat behaves. So today, we're revisiting Skyrim's most broken hidden weapons and the strange places Bethesda left them behind. Let's begin.
General Talia, sir. The Headsman is waiting.
The Headsman's axe technically introduces itself before we even finish the tutorial, which is impressive for a weapon most of us never think to pick up. We meet it in Helgen, moments after character creation, when someone else gets their head removed and we're politely informed that we're next. It's an efficient opening statement, and one which I remember rather fondly. At the time, of course, we're more concerned with not dying, so the axe just registers as part of the scenery, just another piece of trauma dressed as set dressing. But Skyrim, being Skyrim, brings it back later without a hint of explanation or ceremony. We see it again in Solitude, wielded by Attar, the city's executioner, part-time follower, and full-time wall of muscle. Help him out with a short quest involving a rogue prisoner, and he becomes available as a follower, and the axe is ours through perfectly legal inventory management. We can also pickpocket him or kill him if we're feeling tidy. The game doesn't object, neither does history. Now, as a weapon, the Headsman's axe is refreshingly uninterested in proving anything. It has no enchantment, though it can be enchanted, it can't be improved, and swings with the urgency of a committee vote. But it does have one trait that Skyrim rarely draws attention to, and quietly undervalues. Its reach is absurd. In fact, it has the longest melee range in the entire game. Longer than greatswords, longer than warhammers, longer than anything that looks like it should reasonably hit harder than our decisions. Which means we can stand at a comfortably polite distance and still connect, turning combat into something less like a fight and more like a procedure. Step forward, swing, paperwork complete. It's also far lighter than it has any right to be, which means it moves faster than its size suggests. I wouldn't call the Headsman's axe powerful, and I wouldn't call it practical, but it is memorable. There's a quiet satisfaction in taking the weapon that nearly ended our story at the very beginning and using it to bring things to a close with the same detached efficiency. Some weapons don't need fire or fury, just bad memories and a very long reach.
This is it. Gathric awaits us.
At a glance, the steel Battleaxe of Fiery Souls looks like a relic from the early game discard pile. Faintly enchanted, faintly glowing, and easy to outgrow. It's the sort of weapon we expect to admire briefly, then replace the moment something heavier or more theatrical turns up. Which is precisely why it works. You'll find the axe at the end of Ironbind Barrow, resting behind the throne of Warlord Gathric, a Draugr overlord who displays it behind his throne and then proceeds not to use it. It doesn't announce itself, it doesn't demand attention, it just sits there, quietly waiting for someone to notice how it's been put together. Because here's the detail that really matters. This Battleaxe carries two effects, fire damage and soul trap, but Skyrim doesn't treat them as separate enchantments. They're fused into a single one, and that small classification choice causes a larger mechanical ripple. Normally, stacking enchantments like this comes with trade-offs, faster charge drain, more upkeep, more friction. However, here, the game doesn't. Both effects fire together automatically through a single enchantment. The real value, though, isn't the axe itself, it's what we can learn from it. Once we disenchant the Battleaxe and learn Fiery Soul Trap, we can apply that single combined enchantment alongside one other effect. A personal favourite of mine is Chaos Damage. Put the two together and we filled both enchantment slots with effects that scale far better than they look. On a Stalrim weapon, things get especially cooperative. Stalrim boosts frost-based enchantments by 25%, and since Chaos Damage contains a frost component, Skyrim accepts this without question and applies the bonus to the entire Chaos effect. Fire, frost, shock, all of it gets amplified. Add the augmented flames, frost, and shock perks from the destruction tree, maybe top it off with Azidal's mask for good measure, and the numbers start to climb in ways the game never really prepares us for. The result is damage that stacks faster than it explains itself. One swing triggers multiple elements, captures a soul, and feeds the next charge automatically. And that's the point. The steel Battleaxe of Fiery Souls isn't impressive because of what it is, it's impressive because of what it teaches us. The axe itself is temporary, the enchantment is permanent. Once we understand how Skyrim is categorizing effects rather than questioning outcomes, it becomes clear that this isn't really a weapon at all. It's a template.
Hey, there's my bow.
Some weapons in Skyrim look powerful, some sound powerful, and then there's Zephyr, a dwarven bow that looks completely ordinary and behaves nothing like one. We find it in Heynekhtnamet, a collapsed Dwemer ruin in the Reach during the Lost to the Ages questline. The place is already heavy with absence, echoing machinery, half-buried mechanisms, and the lingering ghost of Catria, still tethered to the moment a poorly placed log ended her expedition. However, that same log, balanced over a long drop, is where Zephyr waits, unclaimed, unremarkable, and exactly where it was left. On paper, Zephyr isn't that impressive. It's a dwarven bow, and that comes with the usual expectations. Solid damage, reliable construction, and a draw speed that usually trades pace for power. That's the trade-off. But Zephyr simply doesn't follow it. Its innate enchantment increases draw speed by roughly a third, pushing it into a category it was never meant to occupy. In practice, it fires at the same speed as a longbow and nearly twice as fast as a Daedric one, while still being treated as a normal dwarven bow. Stack it with the quickshot perk and the rhythm of combat starts to change. We're no longer choosing moments to fire, we're applying pressure. Enemies stagger, reposition, and fall apart under a constant stream of arrows that never quite gives them the space to respond. At that point, Zephyr stops feeling like a bow and starts behaving more like a mechanism, something designed to keep firing until nothing is left standing. If you're heading up to retrieve it, do watch your footing though. Skyrim has a habit of leaving lessons behind exactly where someone else learned them the hard way.
I am Lua Alskaven. Who are you to disrupt my work?
There are weapons in Skyrim that announce themselves with grandeur, Daedric horns, glowing runes, bursts of elemental fury. And then there's Ghostblade, which looks like it was forged from moonlight and regret. You'll find it in Ansilvund, a Nordic ruin tucked into the mountains above Shore Stone, guarded by necromancers who clearly thought subtle ambience meant filling every hallway with Draugr and despair. To earn the blade, you'll need to complete the quest A Love Beyond Death, which sounds romantic at first, until you realize the necromancer Lua Alskaven is trying to turn her dead husband into a ghost slave. Standard necromantic courtship, I suppose. Once she's dealt with, the spirits of Holgeir and Fury will reward you with a weapon that quietly ignores the rules. On paper, Ghostblade is weak. Its base damage is only 8, the same as a steel sword. But numbers don't tell the full story. Each strike also deals 3 points of armor ignoring damage, guaranteed. And more importantly, the whole thing weighs just 1 unit. That's not light, that's phantom tier. It swings like air, barely chews through stamina, and in the hands of a fast attacker, it becomes something far more dangerous than its stats suggest. If you're running a dual-wield build, this is the ideal offhand weapon. Fast enough to shred through enemies, weightless enough to feel like cheating, and it won't demand stamina tribute every time you power attack. In the hands of someone who knows what they're doing, it cuts deeper than most weapons twice its size.
Please, do this for me, so I can finally regain the respect that I've lost.
Most swords in Skyrim are fairly predictable. They swing, slice, sheath, occasionally spark. But once in a while, you find a weapon that doesn't just cut, it behaves. The Bloodskal Blade isn't content with just being sharp, it wants to be clever. You'll find it buried deep beneath Raven Rock Mine, in a place called Bloodskal Barrow, which is exactly the sort of location name that suggests OSHA violations and ancestral trauma. The journey starts with a man named Cressius Carelius, who's arguing with his wife and insists quite passionately that his great-grandfather didn't die in a mining accident, but rather discovered something ancient and dangerous, which for us is always a good sign. Follow the quest The Final Descent, descend through the increasingly cursed corridors, and eventually you'll reach the remains of Gratian Carelius himself, skeletal, slumped, and helpfully dead next to a very large, very glowing red sword. This is the Bloodskal Blade, a two-handed greatsword that fires arcs of red energy when you power attack, slicing through the air, walls, and if you're lucky, anything unfortunate enough to be standing in your way. The direction of the wave depends on how you swing. Vertical attacks launch vertical beams, horizontal attacks do the same. And it's not just for show either. The blade is required to solve a motion-activated puzzle that has blocked every adventurer with a 2-digit IQ for the last 200 years. But once we've waved our way to the door, the real fun begins. The energy blast deals 30 points of damage, doesn't cost any charge to use, and can strike targets at a surprising distance, even through obstacles. It's also one of the very few ways a melee warrior can tag a dragon mid-hover without switching to archery or shouting in frustration. And if you're feeling extra slippery, you can activate Become Ethereal and throw energy blades around without ever ending the shout, which feels just a little bit unfair. It's a blade, it's a puzzle key, it's a ranged weapon disguised as a greatsword, and above all, it's a reminder that sometimes the best way to solve an ancient mystery is to hit it, very specifically, and from several feet away.
Only you can truly defeat these monsters, Dragonborn.
Dragonbane is one of those weapons that doesn't waste time pretending to be subtle. It has a job, a history, and a very specific grudge. And if we happen to share that grudge, it suddenly becomes one of the most efficient tools in the game. You'll find it during the main quest, Alduin's Wall, once Delphine and Esbern finally usher us into Skyhaven Temple. Inside, just before reaching the wall itself, there's a side chamber to the left, an armory, and sitting there on a table next to a full set of Blade's armor is Dragonbane. Now mechanically, Dragonbane is a one-handed Akaviri katana with a split personality. Against dragons, it deals heavy bonus damage, and against everything else, it channels shock damage. The result is a weapon that feels purpose-built without feeling useless outside its niche. There is, however, a quiet catch. Dragonbane is a leveled weapon, and its strength is locked the moment we first enter Skyhaven Temple. So if we arrive early, it's fine, perfectly serviceable, but if we wait until level 46 or higher, it becomes genuinely frightening, reaching its strongest form with a higher base damage and a significant bonus against dragons, 40 extra points to be exact. Skyrim as ever rewards patience with numbers and punishes curiosity with regret. Unlike many unique weapons, Dragonbane can be improved at a grindstone using a quicksilver ingot. It also benefits from the steel smithing perk, despite looking like it belongs several tiers higher. So even with a modest smithing investment, it comfortably keeps pace with endgame gear, especially if your endgame involves repeatedly annoying large flying reptiles. Dragonbane doesn't try to impress, it just shows up, does exactly what it is made to do, and reminds us that sometimes the most effective weapons are the ones with a very clear enemy in mind.
That is one big hammer.
At a glance, the Longhammer looks like a normal orcish warhammer, which makes it easy to miss the fact that it doesn't behave like one. You'll find it in Liar's Retreat, a cave tucked away in the Reach, southwest of Solitude. Despite the name, it isn't a hideout so much as the aftermath of a very one-sided disagreement between a group of bandits and a Falmer infestation. The front half plays out like a ruined tavern brawl, the back half is all chittering caves and poor life choices. Push all the way through to the final chamber and you'll eventually find a bandit, Rad, laid out on the altar, with the Longhammer resting beside him. Now, here's the important part. The Longhammer's defining trait isn't an enchantment, at least not in the way the game normally means it, it's weight, or more accurately, the lack of it. While it's technically an orcish warhammer, it weighs significantly less than it should, and that single decision causes a small mechanical landslide. The Longhammer swings about 30% faster than a standard warhammer. That bumps its speed from the usual two-handed crawl to something bordering on enthusiasm. The game treats this speed bonus as a physical property, not magic, which means it slips neatly past one of Skyrim's most important restrictions. We can still enchant it, and we can still use elemental fury with it. So if you shout while wielding the Longhammer, you don't just swing faster, you erase the traditional weakness of warhammers entirely. Suddenly, we're delivering heavy armor-crushing hits at a pace that feels deeply inconsiderate to everyone involved. With even modest smithing, it keeps pace with higher-tier weapons, and with elemental fury active, it turns into what is arguably the highest sustained DPS two-handed weapon in the game, all without glowing, humming, or pretending it was ever meant to be balanced. The Longhammer doesn't look special, and it doesn't explain itself, it just rewards the player who notices that sometimes the most dangerous thing in Skyrim isn't raw power, it's momentum.
There's the Blade's agent. Kill him!
Bolar's Oathblade isn't hidden in the traditional Skyrim sense. It isn't locked behind a boss, buried in a ruin, or waiting at the end of a dungeon that clearly doesn't meet modern safety standards. It's left behind deliberately by someone who understood exactly what was coming next. Achilles Bolar was a member of the Blades who survived the Thalmor Purge and retreated into the forests of Falkreath, carrying one last oath and a great deal of quiet defiance. He chose Bloated Man's Grotto, a place sacred to Talos, and set his sword at the base of the shrine alongside a short writ. The message is simple: he won't survive what's coming, but the Blade might, and if a rightful Cloud ruler ever passes this way, it should go with them. That's the setup, however, the catch is timing. Bloated Man's Grotto is also the stage for Ill Met by Moonlight, and the moment that quest begins, the cave stops being a sanctuary and becomes a hunting ground. The shrine vanishes, the layout shifts, and Bolar's Oathblade is removed from the world entirely, without ceremony or warning. Technically, the cave can sometimes reset after enough time has passed, but relying on that is an exercise in faith that Skyrim rarely rewards. In my opinion, you should probably take it before the hunt begins. Thank me later. When you do, what you're picking up is a leveled Akaviri katana, fast, efficient, and far stronger than it initially looks. Its enchantment drains a substantial amount of stamina on hit and causes creatures and people up to level 12 to flee for 30 seconds. Early to mid-game, that combination is quietly devastating. Stamina damage shuts down power attacks, while the fear effect turns crowded fights into a series of awkward one-on-one conversations. That's where the weapon makes the most sense. Bolar didn't hide his sword, he placed it somewhere sacred, wrote down why it mattered, and walked away knowing he wouldn't be coming back. The game gives us one chance to notice that decision, and sadly, most players don't.
I've been hunting and fishing in these parts for years.
Some weapons are hidden behind locked doors or obscure quest flags. The Fang of Heynekhtnamet is hidden behind something far more demanding: patience, persistence, and a willingness to take fishing in Skyrim far more seriously than anyone ever intended. It comes from the Rift and Fishery, after we've proven at length that we're willing to engage with fishing on the game's terms. Speak to Swims in Deep Water, work your way through the fishing challenges, and eventually you'll be given the final quest, Fishing Legend. This requires us to find 4 of the rarest fish in Skyrim: the Angelfish, Angler, Lyrotail Antheus, and Scorpionfish. With the right knowledge, we don't even need to use a rod. Each one of them can be collected directly from fixed locations. So this isn't a test of skill so much as a scavenger hunt with aquatic branding. Hand them over, and Swims in Deep Water rewards us with the Fang of Heynekhtnamet. The blade itself is carved from the literal tooth of a swamp leviathan, a creature from Blackmarsh so old and violent that Argonian accounts still argue over whether it was a dragon or something worse. A northern war chief eventually killed it and kept the tooth as a trophy. Over time, that trophy became a weapon, and now it somehow ended up in our pocket. Mechanically, it's exceptional. The Fang has a base damage of 13, putting it above even the Dragonbane dagger, and it swings at the fastest dagger speed possible. It also carries a built-in shock enchantment, dealing 30 points of damage, and drains enemy magicka with every hit. An element few enemies resist, and even fewer enjoy losing their spellcasting while they bleed. Because it's a dagger, all of this damage gets multiplied mercilessly by Assassin's Blade. A 15-time sneak multiplier applied to top-end damage doesn't feel like balance so much as an accounting error. Most enemies don't get a second thought, let alone a second chance. Even without stealth, the speed alone makes it lethal, stacking shock damage faster than many enemies can respond. What makes the Fang special isn't that it's hard to earn, it's that Skyrim makes us work for it in a completely different way. No dungeon crawl, no boss fight, just time, repetition, and the slow realization that we've become exactly the kind of person who deserves to carry a knife made from a myth.
Your staff! Gods, it's made of Aetherium! Pure Aetherium!
The Ethereal Staff isn't hidden because it's hard to find, it's hidden because Skyrim asks us very politely to choose not to take it. This is the same quest that quietly gave us Zephyr earlier, but Lost to the Ages has a habit of revealing its value in stages. What begins with a book and a rumour turns into a long Dwemer pilgrimage, following the ghost of Catria through forgotten ruins as we discover 4 Aetherium shards scattered across Skyrim. Once the shards are collected, the trail leads us to Bethalft, and from there deep underground to the Aetherium Forge itself. Only here do the shards finally come together, forming the Aetherium Crest, and only here does the game make its real demand. Unlike most quest rewards, this one doesn't decide for us. We're given 3 options: the Ethereal Crown, the Ethereal Shield, and the Ethereal Staff. But the trick is that the forge only works once. That means one choice and no second chances. I typically go for the Ethereal Crown, as 2 standing stones active at the same time is rather powerful. But anyway, this is about the staff. The staff itself summons a dwarven spider or a dwarven sphere for 60 seconds. Mechanical companions pulled briefly back into the world to fight on our behalf. On paper, that sounds excellent. In practice, this is where the staff earns its reputation. The summons don't scale especially well, and later in the game, they tend to function more as mobile distractions than actual threats. But that's also why the Ethereal Staff belongs here. The Ethereal Crown is powerful, yes, the Ethereal Shield is clever, sure, but the staff is specific. It's for players who value preparation over raw output, who like walking into a fight already accompanied by something clanking ominously behind them. Early to mid-game, it can genuinely tilt encounters. Later on, it becomes more about control, positioning, and buying time than dealing damage. It's not the obvious choice, and it's rarely the recommended one, but if you take it knowing what it is, and what it isn't, the Ethereal Staff makes a quiet kind of sense.
The note says it's from General Falk's Carriers, but that's impossible.
We've already seen what happens when Skyrim bundles too much elemental damage into a single enchantment. Champion's Cudgel is what happens when the game decides to do it again, but louder, heavier, and without pretending it was an accident. We get it on Solstheim during March of the Dead, a quest that begins almost accidentally as we leave Ravenrock and help Captain Velith deal with an Ashspawn attack. A short investigation later, and we're pointed toward Fort Frostmoth, where an Imperial general named Falk's Carriers is still fighting a war that ended 200 years ago. He's undead, confused, and very much armed. But when he finally goes down, the Cudgel comes with him. Now, the reason Champion's Cudgel matters isn't its base damage, even though as a Nordic Warhammer it already hits hard enough to make conversation shorter. It's the enchantment. Chaos damage. Every strike has a 50% chance to trigger fire, a 50% chance to trigger frost, and a 50% chance to trigger shock, each for 25 points of damage. And because those chances roll independently, you don't just get one element sometimes, you often get 2 at once, and more often than you'd expect, you get all 3. An overlapping burst of elemental damage that makes combat look like a misfiring Dwemer experiment. Most players dismantle the Champion's Cudgel almost immediately because once chaos damage is learned, it becomes a foundation rather than a feature. Put it on a faster weapon, layer in destruction perks, and suddenly we're not stacking enchantments anymore, we're letting the game stack itself. The Cudgel is simply the proof of concept. Lore-wise, that feels appropriate. Falk's Carriers was a disciplined Imperial officer once, resurrected through Hearthstone necromancy and left clinging to orders no one remembers issuing. When we take the Cudgel, we're not just looting a boss, we're inheriting the last useful thing he brought back from the past. And fittingly, it's pure chaos.
Emperor Titus Mead II must be eliminated.
Windshear is hidden in plain sight, which is fitting because it's also one of the clearest examples of Skyrim quietly handing us something completely unbalanced and trusting us not to make a fuss about it. We can get it during or after the Dark Brotherhood's final quest, Hail Sithis, when we're sent to assassinate Emperor Titus Mead II aboard his personal flagship, the Kataraya. The mission is dramatic, heavy with finality, and designed to keep our attention firmly inside the ship, which is precisely why most players miss this weapon entirely. Once we board the Kataraya, we need to ignore the interior for a moment and head to the very front of the ship. Walk past the deck out onto the bowsprit, the narrow beam jutting out over the water, and right at the tip, lodged casually into the wood, is Windshear. Now, on paper, Windshear doesn't look impressive. Its base damage is unremarkable, and if we were judging it purely by numbers, it would barely qualify as noteworthy. But that's not what makes it famous. The enchantment is where things quietly fall apart. You see, Windshear has a built-in effect that gives every single hit a 100% chance to stagger enemies. Every hit, without exception. And because stagger interrupts actions, this means that anything we're fighting simply doesn't get a chance to fight back. Giants, dragons, Draugr Deathlords. None of them are exempt. As long as we keep swinging, they stay locked in place, permanently flinching, trapped in a combat loop they never consented to. It also has a chance to paralyze on bash attacks, but that's almost beside the point. By the time paralysis actually matters, the fight is already over in spirit. This is why some unofficial patches nerf it, removing the guaranteed stagger entirely. I actually had a hard time reverting it back just to show you guys. Bethesda almost certainly never intended it to work this way, and Windshear exists in that rare space where design oversight becomes legend. Left untouched, it's arguably the most powerful one-handed weapon in the entire game. Not because it hits hard, but because it refuses to let anything else participate. There's something strangely appropriate about finding it here, at the end of the Dark Brotherhood. After all the secrecy, manipulation, and carefully planned violence, the ultimate reward isn't subtle at all. It's a sword that wins by simply not allowing opposition. And if that decision feels a little unfair, well, by this point in Skyrim, we've probably earned at least one bad decision that works out far too well. Diolch am wylio, Derwiniaid. Thanks for watching, wizards.